This man is no ordinary person. At first glance, he looks like a powerful crime boss who runs the entire area. Yet, somehow, he shows up at a cash van security company to work for a modest monthly salary. During the fitness and evaluation tests, Patrick deliberately hides his true abilities. He intentionally misses targets during the shooting test and pretends that lifting heavy weights is a struggle for him. He even performs poorly during the driving test, acting as if he barely knows how to handle a vehicle. In the end, he scores exactly 70% and barely passes. 70% just enough to pass, not a single point higher or lower. Patrick has complete control over his performance. Thanks to this carefully planned act, he successfully gets hired by the security company. However, the job is far from easy. More than 2,000 bank robberies take place every year. That means around 14 robberies every week. In simple terms, somewhere every single day, a bank is being targeted by criminals. And Patrick that danger on his very first day. While transporting cash, a pickup truck suddenly blocks their path. Armed robbers rush toward the vehicle, drag the captain out of the van, and knock him to the ground with a punch before demanding all the money. The driver sitting beside Patrick is terrified. He is shaking so badly that he cannot even bring himself to step out of the vehicle. Patrick, on the other hand, remains completely calm. "I'll handle it," he says. Following the robber's instructions, he opens the rear door of the van and begins transferring the cash into the criminal's vehicle. While doing so, he intentionally drops one of the money bags onto the ground. The gang leader immediately starts shouting through his walkie-talkie, "If you try anything clever, I'll shoot your partner." Then, he orders one of his men to pick up the fallen bag. "Are you blind, idiot?" "Sorry, buddy." The moment the robber gets close enough, Patrick suddenly attacks. In a matter of seconds, he brutally takes him down. The remaining robbers panic and start running. Patrick casually walks after them and waits for the perfect opportunity. Then he fires a shot directly into one robber's knee. But surprisingly, the man keeps moving. Instead of collapsing, he drags his injured leg and continues trying to escape. Patrick calmly adjusts his aim and fires again. This time, the robber drops to the ground. "You can't shoot me. Oops, my mistake." The other security guards witness the entire thing from behind. They are completely stunned by Patrick's unbelievable accuracy and combat skills. Their jaws practically hit the floor. Yet Patrick acts as if nothing unusual happened. He walks over to the bodies and begins removing the robbers' masks one by one. He is searching for someone, the man responsible for his son's death. 5 months earlier, Patrick and his son had been driving to a supermarket together. On the way, his son spotted a roadside pancake stand and asked for a snack. Patrick pulled over and stepped out to buy the pancakes. While he was waiting for the order, something terrible happened on the other side of the road. A group of criminals had stopped a cash van by pretending to be road construction workers. Using heavy machinery, they lifted the rear wheels of the vehicle off the ground. Then they cut open the back doors with industrial tools and tossed a stun grenade inside. Moments later, the robbers forced everyone out at gunpoint and transferred all the money into their own vehicles. The robbery was almost complete. Then one of the criminals noticed something. Patrick's son had witnessed everything. The robber immediately pointed a gun at the boy and ordered him to get out of the car. The child was terrified. His first instinct was to call his father, but Patrick's phone was busy. Seeing the gun aimed directly at him, the boy didn't try anything foolish. He quietly stepped out of the car and lay flat on the ground exactly as instructed. At that moment, it seemed like the robbers were simply trying to control the situation. The robbers would have escaped without any problems, and the boy would have survived if everyone had simply stayed still. But one of the security guards decided to fight back. An older guard tried to stop him, warning him not to do anything reckless. However, the younger guard suddenly turned around, pulled out a knife, and charged straight at one of the robbers. With a single strike, he managed to bring the man down. When the older guard rushed forward to help him, he was killed as well. Watching all of this unfold, Patrick's son couldn't control his curiosity. He secretly peeked out to see what was happening. That single glance changed everything. The boy saw that one of the robbers had removed his mask. The criminal instantly realized that his identity had been exposed. Without hesitation, he raised his gun and opened fire. The bullet struck the child, killing him on the spot. A few moments later, Patrick returned carrying the pancakes. The scene that greeted him was every parent's worst nightmare. His son was lying on the ground. Patrick dropped everything and sprinted toward him like a madman. Before he could reach the boy, one of the robbers fired a shot into Patrick's shoulder. The impact knocked him to the ground. Even through the unbearable pain, Patrick never took his eyes off the man who had murdered his son. The killer had no idea who he was dealing with. He had no idea how much suffering he had just brought upon himself. A few days later, Patrick woke up in a hospital bed. That was when he received the confirmation that his son was gone. The news shattered him. From that moment on, he made a promise to himself. No matter what it took, he would personally find the man responsible and make him pay. His wife was equally devastated. She blamed Patrick for failing to protect their son and eventually demanded a divorce. Patrick didn't argue. He didn't defend himself. Deep down, he blamed himself even more than she did. 3 hours later, Patrick drove to the rooftop of a building. There, he met a high-ranking CIA officer. The officer pulled a piece of paper from his pocket and handed it to Patrick. Written on it were the names of some of the most dangerous criminals in the country, people who had managed to avoid justice for years. Patrick looked at the list and calmly said that the job the authorities hadn't been able to finish in 20 years would take him only 2 weeks. The officer simply smiled and nodded. After returning home, Patrick immediately called in his most trusted man. His order was simple: find the killer at any cost. Over the next few days, his organization hunted down everyone connected to the names on that list. Many criminals disappeared overnight. Some were killed. Others were interrogated. Even people with the slightest possible connection to the murderer weren't spared. But despite all their efforts, they found nothing. No clues. No witnesses. No trace of the man who had killed Patrick's son. At that point, Patrick realized something important. This wasn't the work of an ordinary robber. Whoever had done this clearly had powerful connections and a strong support network behind him. Weeks of non-stop investigations and violent interrogations exhausted Patrick's men. One of his closest associates, Lao Bai, had worked so hard that his beard had practically turned white from stress. Eventually, one woman suggested that Patrick change his approach. She pointed out an important question. How had the robbers managed to pull off such a massive cash van robbery without leaving behind a single clue? The answer seemed obvious. Someone inside the company had helped them. That theory changed everything. Patrick decided to go undercover. He created a new identity and joined a cash security company as a guard. That was also the reason he had intentionally scored poorly during the recruitment tests. He didn't want anyone becoming suspicious of him. After getting the job, Patrick quietly began gathering information. Whenever nobody was paying attention, he secretly used his phone to photograph the employee ID cards of his co-workers. One night, his investigation led him directly to Dana's house. The financial records showed that a large amount of money had suddenly appeared in her account. Patrick was convinced she had been paid for leaking information to the robbers. Determined to learn the truth, he confronted her. At first, Dana assumed he had simply come to talk, but she quickly realized she was wrong. Patrick suddenly pulled out a gun. No, okay, I'll tell you everything. Just wait. The fear in her eyes made it obvious she understood he wasn't joking. Terrified, Dana finally explained where the money had come from. According to her, the cash wasn't connected to the robbers at all. Someone had accidentally left the money behind at the company, and she had greedily decided to keep it for herself. She admitted that she was selfish and greedy, but she insisted that she would never kill anyone for money. For now, Patrick chose to believe her. After all, his men were already holding Dana's parents, which meant she had no reason to lie. Still, Patrick knew his search was far from over. The real traitor inside the company was still hiding somewhere in the shadows. The story behind those mysterious robbers was finally revealed. They were actually a team of retired soldiers, led by a sergeant named Billy. For years, they had risked their lives serving their country. But after retirement, they had no interest in taking low-paying jobs that require hard labor. Instead, they formed a gang and began robbing cash vans. Their very first robbery earned them more than $1 million. Although the middleman took a large commission, the amount they received was still far greater than what they could have earned from any regular job. Once they got a taste of that money, they decided to make it their full-time profession. Using their profits, they upgraded all of their weapons with the latest equipment. This time, their target was the security company's main cash warehouse. Their plan was to carry out one final massive robbery and then retire permanently. To make it happen, they once again made arrangements with their inside man working in the transport company. Meanwhile, news of how Patrick had taken down the robbers spread throughout the entire company like wildfire. The police also arrived to investigate the incident. Patrick's supervisor thought this would be the perfect opportunity to get him fired, but the company boss had a completely different opinion. He praised Patrick's bravery, promised him a promotion, and even offered him a salary increase. One day, he and his captain were returning to headquarters after completing a job when the captain suddenly said something that completely shocked him. "My friend, I helped them rob the cash trucks. The guards who died were necessary casualties. The boy's death, however, was just bad luck." The captain not only admitted that he was the gang's inside man, but he also threatened Patrick. He demanded that Patrick help them rob the warehouse. If Patrick refused, he would suffer a very brutal death. Most importantly, the warehouse robbery was about to happen very soon. Patrick knew that this was not the right time to make a move. The robbery was scheduled for that very day, so he pretended to agree with the captain's demands. After all, he had finally managed to get this close to the robbers. There was no way he was going to let them slip away now. He watched as the captain first disabled the vehicle's location tracking and cameras before driving the truck into a basement. The employees in the control room immediately became suspicious when they lost contact with the vehicle. However, the captain quickly came up with an excuse, claiming that the camera system had malfunctioned and needed time to be repaired. "Don't worry, boss. I'm working on the repairs right now." Since the truck was not carrying any cash at the time, headquarters did not question him any further. Just then, a small car suddenly entered the basement, and several heavily armed robbers stepped out. Their first move was to hold Patrick at gunpoint. After that, all of them hid inside the rear compartment of the cash van. A short while later, the captain drove the vehicle back to the company's headquarters. Avoiding inspections, he headed directly into the warehouse. The moment no one was paying attention, the robbers burst out of the compartment. Within seconds, they had taken control of everyone inside. Patrick was taken hostage and forced toward the cash storage area. The supervisor became so terrified that he ordered everyone not to resist. "Take out your guns, put them on the ground, and throw them toward me." The security officers immediately surrendered their weapons. Meanwhile, the robbers marched the captain at gunpoint toward the control room. The officer sitting inside had been casually passing the time. When he turned around, he suddenly realized a robbery was in progress and that armed criminals were threatening him to open the door. Without hesitation, he activated the alarm. The sound of the alarm instantly put everyone on high alert. Weapons were drawn, and both sides prepared for a deadly fight. At the same time, the robbers threatened to kill the captain unless the officer opened the control room door. "Open the door, or they'll kill me." A fierce exchange of gunfire followed. However, the robbers remained unharmed because they had already equipped themselves with heavy bulletproof armor. Eventually, someone opened the door, and a massive explosion followed. Using their powerful weapons, the robbers wiped out all of the security personnel within minutes. The entire warehouse now belonged to them. They immediately pressed the button for the main gate and allowed their sergeant waiting outside to enter. Then, they began carrying out the next phase of their plan. Bundles of cash were packed into bags while the men outside loaded them into vehicles. Everything seemed to be going perfectly. But then, without warning, a guard launched an attack. The 2 shots he fired successfully distracted the robbers. And this was exactly the opportunity Patrick had been waiting for. Moving with lightning speed, Patrick spun around, knocked one robber to the ground, and pinned his neck until he stopped moving. Afterward, he began removing the masks of the robbers one by one, checking their faces. When he realized this was not the man he was searching for, he hurried over to his co-workers, untied their restraints, and told them to hide. Looking at the heavily armed enemies in the distance, Patrick wondered how he could take them on. Then his eyes fell on something lying on the floor, a complete set of equipment. There was a mask that concealed the person's identity and a powerful bulletproof vest. Without wasting a second, Patrick changed clothes and disguised himself as one of the robbers. He confidently approached another gang member, pressed a gun against his head, and ordered him to remove his mask. When he confirmed that the man was not the killer he was looking for, Patrick pulled the trigger immediately. The loud gunshot alerted the rest of the robbers. Yet, Patrick remained calm. He quickly turned away and hid his phone inside his front pocket. What he didn't realize was that one of the robbers had spotted him through a camera. Elsewhere, a surviving officer managed to spot one of the robbers. He immediately fired 2 shots, but a powerful blast followed, and the officer was killed on the spot. Patrick rushed outside, but a bullet accidentally struck him. Fortunately, the bulletproof gear absorbed the impact. He instantly fired back, landing a single shot before charging forward and tackling his opponent. Patrick had not expected the man to be so strong. During the struggle, a bullet accidentally hit Patrick in the thigh. He quickly twisted his opponent's arm and aimed for his neck. However, his gun had run out of ammunition. Reacting with incredible speed, Patrick pulled out a knife and attacked. Moments later, the robber collapsed to the ground. As the situation continued to worsen, the robbers began considering abandoning the robbery altogether. Meanwhile, one of their short, dark-skinned teammates had already called for backup, and a large armed team was now on its way to the warehouse. The battle was far from over. The robbers had fired only a few rounds when the traitorous captain suddenly approached them. Pretending to be on their side, he acted as if he had come to provide backup and asked them for a pistol to defend himself. Meanwhile, the wounded robbers were already planning their escape. At that moment, Patrick grabbed a heavy weapon and unleashed a relentless barrage of gunfire at them. After emptying the magazine, he quickly reloaded and continued firing. Eventually, he successfully killed the older dark-skinned robber. But just as he was about to keep shooting, the captain suddenly attacked him from behind. The captain shot Patrick and knocked him to the ground, but his betrayal did not end there. He also turned against the very men who still had no idea about his true intentions. Using the same trick, he lured another one of his teammates out into the open and riddled him with bullets as well. After eliminating his remaining partners, the captain hurriedly loaded all the cash into a vehicle. Then he drove the cash van out of the warehouse at high speed. For Patrick, the most frustrating part was that he had once again watched his son's killer escape right before his eyes. There was very little time left, which was why the robbers did not bother getting out of the vehicle to finish Patrick off completely. The moment they exited the warehouse, they rammed a police car blocking the gate and triggered a dangerous chase through the city. No one knew how many streets they raced through. Eventually, they drove into a building that had been prepared in advance. To stop the pursuing police, they quickly sealed the entrance behind them. Now, they needed to transfer the cash as quickly as possible. Out of the original 7-member gang, only 3 men remain alive. One of them was Billy, who had been shot in the neck and was barely hanging on. The long-haired robber, the same man who had killed Patrick's son, suddenly became consumed by greed. He wanted all of the money for himself. First, he told the captain to carry the cash inside while he stayed behind, pretending to help Billy. But Billy had already sensed that something was wrong. He quickly reached for his pistol, yet the long-haired robber was one step ahead. He snatched the weapon away, threw it aside, pulled out a knife, and ended his own boss's life in a single swift motion. Afterward, he calmly walked over to the captain and explained that Billy had died from excessive blood loss. The captain was somewhat surprised, but he did not become overly suspicious. After all, one less partner meant a larger share of the money for him. The 2 men then loaded all of the cash onto a motorcycle and traveled through a secret tunnel connected to the warehouse. Eventually, they reached a safe zone where a small car had already been prepared. They transferred all of the money into the vehicle. However, as the long-haired robber stepped forward to open the door, the captain saw an opportunity. He quietly pulled a pistol from his pocket, intending to kill him and keep the fortune for himself. But the outcome was not what he expected. The moment the captain turned, the long-haired robber once again proved to be one step ahead. Without hesitation, he pulled the trigger. Now, the entire 16-crore fortune belonged to him alone. The only question was how long he would be able to enjoy his blood-stained wealth. After returning home, the long-haired robber celebrated by pouring himself an expensive bottle of aged liquor. As he sat there imagining all the ways he could spend his newfound fortune, he suddenly heard a phone ringing. Looking around, he discovered a phone hidden inside one of the bags. He had barely started checking it when a voice suddenly spoke from behind him. "Aren't you going to answer it?" Gathering his courage, he forced himself to stay calm and turn around. To his shock, a man had been sitting behind him the entire time. Believing Patrick had come for the money, he immediately offered to split the millions equally between them. But Patrick had no interest in the cash. Instead, he tossed a file onto the table and motioned for the man to open it. Inside was the autopsy report of Patrick's son. The moment the long-haired robber looked at the photographs inside the file, he finally understood that his game was over. What do you want? After an incredibly long wait, Patrick had finally taken revenge for his son with his own hands. Yet, even after the revenge was complete, it could never bring his son back. Patrick remained trapped forever in the memories of that cursed day, the day he lost everything. And with that, the film comes to an end. If you enjoyed this movie recap and stayed with us until the very end, let us know in the comments by simply typing yes. We'd love to hear how your experience was and what you thought about Patrick's journey for revenge. If you liked the video, Don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more amazing movie recaps and story explanations. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.